Hello there. All right, so we grab our reference here. We can talk about how to draw in proportion. So the easiest way to draw in proportion is the box method. And there's probably an actual method title, but I'm just going to call it the box method. And so the idea behind the box method is you imagine a box around the object you're about to draw, and essentially you just copy what is in each box um, in your drawing. And you can basically one-to-one copy something with 100% accurate proportions, right? The easiest way to do the box method is to draw or imagine a box around your subject. And then you just have to look at each box and break it down into smaller and smaller boxes as needed. And an example of where it is needed would be like for this face, because there's so much detail in here. I couldn't just draw this box and then like, oh yeah, the nose just goes here. This is where the nose goes. How do I know that? How do I know that's where the nose goes? Why couldn't the nose go down here? Right? And you'd be like, well, there's this much space here. Okay, well, that's where the nose goes, maybe. But how big is this spot? How do you know how big that is? You know, you have the opposite problem. So you just have to keep breaking the box down until you find some landmarks. So when I do this, there's not really any great landmarks. Maybe you could use the eye. So like the eye is basically right here, but it's not great because it doesn't fall exactly on a line yet, right? But if we break it down one more time, then bingo, we have a winner. We can see the nose is exactly right here with a little bit of the corner missing, right? And then we can break this box down and we can see that corner of that nose goes about here. And then we can find exactly where the nostril goes in this drawing. And the beauty of this is you don't have to recreate it at exactly the same size. I've already made it a bit small. You can make this absolutely ginormous and it doesn't matter because this is still 4 boxes and this is still 4 boxes. It doesn't matter. As long as they stay relative to each other, then you'll be drawing in proportion. Whenever you're drawing or imagining the box, one challenge is that you have to actually be able to draw these lines in the center here, right? And you could just guess, which is what I did. But you could also draw a line from the corner to the corner. And we can see my center line was actually completely spot on, but my horizontal line, you can see the actual horizontal line all the way down here, right? So what you can do is you can actually just start by drawing your box around your character or your subject. And then you can immediately draw these diagonal lines to find the center and the horizontal line. There we go. And now you have your 4 boxes. Okay, so now we have these 4 boxes here. Black, white, white, black. We have 4 boxes. And then we also have inside of all of those, we have 4 boxes. And I've messed up this line apparently. But we can use these, right? So if we go over here and we decide to draw our pig. So now that I have my grid set up, how do you actually use this, right? And keep in mind all of these little squares inside of here, you can just break them down again to get even smaller squares. Um, so keeping that in mind, let's continue. So now we can see where everything falls. We can see that right here on the peak of this line and this line, which is this line and this line, we can see that the pig fat is like this. But we don't quite know the angle. We could guess and say that it's about this angle and this one's about this angle. And then we know the fat goes back here. And that is a valid methodology in order to find angles, especially if you're not using the boxes. Just finding the angles is generally going to be enough to draw with. But if we want to be very exact, we could break this down even more, right? So if we break this down even more, do that, do that, do that, and now we can find the centers once again. There we go. And we can see that in these four, the bottom left, which is this one right here, there is just barely a little nook showing, and then it goes through this one, and then there's barely a nook showing again, and then in this top left square of this section, we can see that it goes all the way through, and it comes to about here, and then it basically touches the top of the image, like this. And then if we go down to this section here, which is right here, we can see that it goes from about here to about here. And then we can see that it goes here and it goes all the way down to this point. And then we can go inwards and down, but we don't exactly know how much space is here. When we want to draw this leg right here, we don't exactly know how much space is there. So what we can do is we can break it down even more. Break it down even more. So now we can see that right here, we can see that it falls in the center of these lines right here. Except for this top square here, where it doesn't. So we can draw a line that goes straight down, but we don't know how far down it goes yet, except it stops right here. So we know the back of the leg looks like this. But we have to find this angle now. And we could just connect those points. We can see this triangle shape here, so we want to recreate that triangle shape here. Then we can see over here, we draw more lines through these. We can see at this bottom box, right? There's actually a bit of hoof right here, which means that we now know this angle must be round at the bottom. Let me shrink that. It must be round at the bottom, otherwise the angles wouldn't match. There we go. Now we can go diagonally this direction, like this. We have to figure out exactly where it leads. So we know it doesn't touch here, because this is this big line, and we can see that it doesn't quite touch. We can look at this box, which is this box right here, and we can see that there is a little gap right here at the bottom. So there's this little gap here, so we know that must be because there's a little bit in this box here. We can keep moving on to the next section here. which is this stomach. We can break this down in half, and we're basically already done because that's the only symbol we needed, because it actually touches right here on this intersection and it goes up to the leg. So we already know that angle. We can see that it continues up into this box here. This box right here. And it continues up partway through here. So it's somewhere around here. We can see there's a little triangle here. So if we copy this angle, this triangle here, we split this in half right here. We can see that that is where the stomach meets the leg. So the leg goes somewhere about here. Draw the diagonal line. It's about here. Because we can see this little right angle here. We want to make sure this is the exact same angle. And then the leg goes down until it touches this point. But it's not a straight line because that is the center of the hoof. So if we look at this box, we can see that there is a right angle right here. But we don't necessarily want to just copy that angle, although we could, like this. Because we could also break the box down one more time, like this. And we could instead see that it goes right about here. So now we have this triangle here, which is a bit more accurate, right? Then we go along here, but we have to figure out how far along we go here for the bottom of the hoof, because the hoof isn't this big. It's a big hoof. It's only this big. So how do we find how big that is? Well, we can see that it goes into the next box, but it doesn't fall on any landmarks. So the next box, we're going to have to segment it again. And every time something doesn't fall on a landmark, you need to add a new segment. Every time it does, then you already have enough segments. You don't need to add any more. That's why some of these segments have a billion triangles and squares, and then other ones just have like 4, right? So now that we have these boxes here, we can see if anything falls on a landmark, and we can see the stomach actually does. The stomach is here. It looks like the stomach basically goes all the way here. So this part right here we know is stomach. In fact, this part right here is chin, and then right here is stomach. And we figure out how high the chin goes. The chin goes up to wherever the leg meets, so the chin and then the leg, but we still don't know where the leg is. So we can see that the leg is essentially exactly in the center of this square here. So right here in the center is where the center of the hoof is, up here. So it goes down here and then out, like that. And then this chin also goes there. So this is the chin. The paw that is down here, or sorry, the hoof that is down here, we are going to see that essentially is right here, but we have to cut this in half in order to find the bottom of it. And it continues all the way here until it is in this box here. And there's just a little piece of it in here, but we don't exactly know where it is yet. We can see that right here is where this mouth starts, and it goes up here. It doesn't quite reach that line. That's where the cheek is. And the cheek goes basically to the same point that the rest of the stuff goes, except it continues up until it touches this line here, which is right here, right? Then we can break down this section. We can see the nostril falls right here. And in the halfway section of that, there is an angle where the hoof in the back goes. We can see in this triangle here, there is a cheek and a nostril. We draw halfway right here. We can see that's where the cheek goes. And it curves till it gets to the nostril, which is essentially right here at this intersection. Along this line here, we can see that there is a brow, but we don't know how high it goes yet. And we can also see this is where that ear is. And we know the ear goes along this angle all the way until it hits the corner, which is right here. So we know that line exists. We don't yet know how far in it goes. So because once again there are no landmarks, we have to make some. So we can go ahead and split this one in half once more, and we can see that the brow goes from here to here. So we know that's how big the brow is. We can see that the halfway point of this section right here is where the cheek ends. We can see that there is also a diagonal here for where the other brow goes. We split this in half right here. Then we can see that the ear goes to the middle section of this spot right here. And then we can connect these two lines because we already have a landmark. That's where the brow goes. And then we need to figure out the ear and the rest of the back. And the contour's done. The contour is the outside. And then we just need to figure out the ear and the eye, and then we're done with the pig. So let's go ahead and do the ear and the eye, right? So the eye, do we have any good landmarks yet? So the eye is right here. So we know the eye is right here, but how do we exactly solve for it? So if we split this in half, right, which is this one right here, then we can see the eye goes to the halfway point of this one. So it goes from here to here. And then right here, it's at the halfway point. So it goes like this. And for this ear section, we can see that there's a little bit of negative space in this top section here. We can use that as a landmark. It's this little space right here. The ear is a straight line all the way to the brow, which is this right here. And it also touches the eye. So the ear is exactly is exactly this big. Then we can find how wide it is. It looks like it goes just a little bit past this point. So it's right here. As far as how low it goes, it looks like it's halfway in this space. So it goes all the way down here, which is a little bit into the eye. So it looks like we're accurate here. And then it goes not quite to the halfway point of this block. So we can make it half again, and we can use that as our guide. And then in this top block, we're going to have to split it up just twice, it looks like. This section right here is how tall it is. So it's a diagonal right here. And then on this cube, it looks like it basically fills up the entire thing. And then in this cube, there is a diagonal. We can use our relative landmark to find it. So now our ear is there. Our guy's looking a bit like a gerbil, but we're not drawing the details yet. All my drawing lines are making it kind of hard to see this, but it connects to where the brow is. So now we need to find this shape right here. So we have to do the same thing we did on the other side. We're just going to split it up into squares. Oops. Gotta draw them straight. There we go. And we can see that in this fourth here, which is right here, it's a diagonal line that leads from the corner to almost the corner, but not quite, which gives us this angle right here. And then in this square right here, we can see there is a gap that's about halfway. So if we cut this in half again, halfway, that is where the next point goes. And then the next one, it just goes all the way to this corner, actually. But it crosses through the exact center of the square is the important thing. And then it goes through this block here. And we're going to cut this one in half. Like that. Because that's how far it goes. It's right here. And that's where the ear starts. And we already know the waypoint. We already know the landmark. We know where the tip of the ear is. So we can just connect those lines. And then we have the other ear. We also know this connects to this. There's a bit of like an internal curve or concave curve. So we can just go ahead and do that. If we go ahead and erase, forgot to draw this part. There's like a little angry brow thing. All right. Oh, and the inner ear. All right, now with all the lines cleaned up, you can see how the drawing would look when you're finished, right? It gives you essentially just a perfect guide to go off of, right? Now, if this were, for instance, not specifically this pig, but it was just like any pig, or if you were trying to draw, like a human in a very specific pose, right? Is in a very specific pose. If you wanted to do that, but draw your own character on top of it, this would be a good baseline because then you could draw, here's my pig OC. Wait, let's get the headband on there. How would a pig wear a headband? Like this, I guess. Okay. Um, and then, of course, he's part of the leaf village, so we get the little leaf symbol on there. And there's his little eye. And we can give him the Sharingan. Where's my red? Go. Got a little Sharingan. And he has like little devil horns. And you can use this as a baseline to basically make anything you want. You can even make alterations. Like the original doesn't have a tail, but we can go ahead and add one. You can do whatever you want at this point.